My whole life, I was Jessica, the family puzzle piece that just didn't fit. While my older cousin, Emma, was the epitome of suburban success, married to a well off lawyer, living in a sprawling, meticulously decorated home, and filling her life with carefully curated events, I was the nomad. My career, which I vaguely described as digital consulting, was viewed with suspicion. In truth, I was the founder and CEO of a global firm specializing in high risk, high return digital infrastructure investment, primarily data centers and server farms. The nature of my work meant I operated from temporary, secure locations worldwide, so I didn't own a permanent address in any major city. To my family, this meant I was drifting, unstable, and, as my mother, Margaret, often sighed, unsettled. The narrative was relentless. Margaret, bless her heart, worried constantly, but her worry often translated into public humiliation. One Christmas dinner, while Emma was detailing the six-figure renovations on her kitchen, Margaret turned to me. "Jessica, dear," she said, her voice laced with anxiety, "do you think you'll ever get a real home? It's just, I can never send you mail. And how do you file taxes without an address? At least Emma has stability." Emma, sitting next to her husband David, just offered a slight, smug smile. I wanted to scream that my unstable business had just secured an $890,000 contract extension with a major European client. But I simply said, "My business handles all the logistics, Mom. I'm fine," and changed the subject. The truth was, my composure was built on years of practice, an impenetrable shield against their judgment. The insults from my cousin, Emma, were far less subtle than my mother's anxious critiques. Emma, the family's golden child, used every interaction as a measuring stick. At her recent baby shower, I gifted her a gorgeous custom-made crib, an heirloom piece I'd commissioned from a renowned artisan. As I handed it over, she looked pointedly at my outfit, a sleek, travel-friendly ensemble. "It's beautiful, Jess," she said, pulling me in close so only a few people could hear. "But I hope you didn't spend your entire savings on this. You know, you really need to be careful with money, especially since you don't have a safety net or a spouse to back you up. And still no permanent address? You're nearly 40, honey. When are you going to stop playing dress-up traveler and join the real world?" She emphasized playing dress-up as if my career was a childish fantasy. I simply tightened my grip on the glass of sparkling water. I was careful not to mention that the sale of one of my smaller, more problematic data center assets had just returned $4.8 million in profit, which I had immediately reinvested. Little did my family realize that the digital consulting was about to explode into a massive multi-million dollar corporation. My success was hiding in plain sight, yet they chose not to see it. I wore a few understated luxury items, quiet indulgences that signaled a certain level of wealth to those who knew what they were looking at. For instance, my laptop bag was a specially commissioned leather briefcase that could withstand international travel and held my highly encrypted communication devices. Emma once saw it and scoffed. "Oh, Jessica, still carrying that huge, clunky thing? You should get a nice light tote like mine." She was carrying a popular mass-market designer bag. She just couldn't recognize that my clunky thing cost more than her entire wardrobe. This ingrained perception of me as the perpetually struggling, slightly messy, and certainly homeless adjacent relative was something I had learned to weaponize. The less they knew, the more power I held. The big family event that summer was the wedding of Emma's younger sister, Charlotte. It was held at an opulent seaside resort, a place designed to showcase wealth and family status. The reception, held in a grand ballroom overlooking the ocean, was where the stacking humiliations began. I had arrived alone, which immediately drew pity from the older generation and scorn from the younger crowd, who were all carefully paired off. Margaret cornered me near the seafood bar. Jessica, I swear I just tried to call your phone number again and it went straight to an international voicemail. I worry about you traveling all the time. Can't you just pick a place? A nice apartment in the city, something with a landline. You're making me feel like an inadequate mother because I don't know where my daughter sleeps most nights. Her anxiety was a low-grade headache for me. Then came the second hit, delivered by David, Emma's husband. He, a mid-level corporate lawyer, often positioned himself as the family's financial guru. He leaned in conspiratorially. "Jess, between you and me, Emma says you've been asking Mom for small favors, like having packages sent to her address. Look, I can talk to my firm. We're always looking for administrative help. It's stable, great benefits. You could at least save enough to stop couch surfing. You really need to stop pretending this digital nomad thing is a permanent career." His offer of administrative help felt like a slap in the face. My pretending was about to hit a major milestone. The escalation peaked when I excused myself to take a crucial call. I stood outside amidst the dramatic floral arrangements. It was my lean counsel, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney named Mrs. Davies. She spoke quickly, her voice tight with excitement. "Jessica, congratulations. The deal in Dublin just closed. We completed the 100% acquisition of the competitor's server farm. Your pre-agreed bonus payout is liquid. You just cleared $23 million personally on that one deal. Also, the closing for the West Coast property is set for tomorrow as planned. And finally, I got the confirmation from Tech Innovator magazine. They are featuring you on the cover next month. Jessica Stone, the global infrastructure architect." I leaned against a marble column, the cool stone a contrast to the sudden heat that flooded my body. $23 million. Liquid. Coupled with my existing assets, my net worth was staggering. And a major magazine cover? The phone call I received that day would change everything, forcing the internal struggle to a resolution. I stood there, staring out at the ocean, asking myself, do I walk away and enjoy this victory in blissful silence? Or do I make them look at the woman they've spent a decade dismissing? The old Jessica craved validation. The new Jessica, the multi-million-dollar infrastructure architect, knew the family dynamic needed a permanent, undeniable reset. I returned to the reception, a calm, calculating certainty radiating from me. I had been keeping the secret that was about to come out in the most spectacular way. The trigger, the ultimate insult that sealed their fate, came not from Emma or Margaret, but from Emma's cousin-in-law, Stephen. He was a new addition to the family gatherings, a freshly minted tech sales director who constantly bragged about his modest condominium purchase. He found me standing near the cake table, sipping champagne, looking perfectly composed. "Jessica, right?" He started, trying to sound friendly, but the superior tone was evident. "Yeah, Emma was just telling me about you. So you're the family's little mystery, the digital drifter? Look, I'm just going to be direct, okay? You really need a home base. You can't just keep moving from Airbnb to Airbnb. You're almost 40 and you have no assets. You're basically homeless. And honestly, it reflects poorly on the family. You need stability, an address, something to show that you've made it." The word homeless, that was it. That final damning simplification of my global, multi-million-dollar business. My career, which required supreme flexibility and discretion, reduced to begging for a roof over my head. The calm I felt was absolute, chilling. I put down my champagne glass. "Stephen," I said, my voice low, clear, and steady, instantly drawing the attention of Emma and David, who were nearby and had clearly heard the tail end of his commentary. "That's a very sweeping and inaccurate generalization, and I assure you my living situation reflects nothing poorly on this family. If anything, it's a testament to the success of my business." I reached into my inconspicuous black clutch. I didn't pull out a bank statement, that would have been too crude. Instead, I pulled out a set of keys. They weren't ordinary keys, they were the custom, heavy, brushed steel keys to a sprawling property I had purchased quietly over the last few months. Attached to the keyring was a small, elegant brass tag engraved with a street address in Atherton, California, one of the most exclusive zip codes in the country. You see, Stephen, I continued, holding the keys up slightly so the light caught the custom engraving on the brass tag. I find that owning a single residence can be restrictive for my work. But when I do purchase, I tend to go for something substantial. I walked over to the nearest table and placed the keys gently next to the guest book. Then, I pulled out the final closing document, the property deed summary. This is the property deed summary for my new primary residence. It's a property I closed on this morning in Atherton. The appraisal value is $5.6 million. The silence was instant, a vacuum in the opulent room. Stephen's jaw dropped so dramatically his face looked slack. Emma, who had rushed over with David, stared from the keys to the document, her cream gown suddenly seeming less important than the figures on the paper. Atherton? David choked out, the color draining from his face. But that's where the tech billionaires live. That's not possible. You live out of hotels. I smiled sweetly. I work out of highly secured temporary locations, David. I own the property, and the deed is right there. Cash purchase, by the way. I find mortgages restrictive. I wasn't done. The final piece of evidence arrived in a digital update, the high-resolution final cover art for the magazine. I pulled out my secure briefcase, opened the screen, and placed it on the table so the headline was clearly visible. The image showed me in my work uniform, a tailored, powerful suit, standing in a large data center. The headline, Jessica Stone, the $40 million woman quietly powering global infrastructure. The reaction was a magnificent spectacle of human frailty. Disbelief was the first wave. Emma snatched the phone, her fingers trembling as she read the byline. This is a fake. You're a consultant. You don't own infrastructure, she whispered, her voice cracking. I calmly extended my hand and picked up my briefcase. My consulting firm handles multi-million-dollar infrastructure acquisitions, Emma. The $23 million liquidation I just finalized this morning was my personal profit share from a major divestment. And my net worth, as of the latest valuation, is comfortably north of $40 million. I looked directly at Stephen, who was now sweating profusely. So no, Stephen, I am not homeless. I was simply waiting for the right moment to decide where I wanted to plant my flag. And I chose an address that requires slightly more than just administrative help to maintain. Margaret rushed over, her face a mask of confusion and instant, nauseating pride. My brilliant girl, a mansion, a CEO. Oh, Jessica, why didn't you tell your mother you were a multimillionaire? We're so proud of you. The panic was setting in for them now. Their entire family hierarchy, their carefully constructed reality, had been shattered by a set of keys and a magazine cover. The aftermath of that wedding reception was exactly what I had anticipated. An instant, frantic scramble for damage control and relevance. Margaret and Emma were the first to descend, a tag team of fake apologies and transparent attempts to insert themselves into my new, lavish reality. The day after the wedding, my phone rang incessantly. Margaret, tearful and dramatic, was the first one I answered. Jessica, darling, I feel terrible about those comments. I truly thought you were struggling. You just never showed anything. Why didn't you just show off a little? We're so proud of you now. You simply must let us come to the Atherton house for Thanksgiving. We can invite the tech innovator editor. I want to tell everyone about my millionaire daughter. I took the call from the balcony of my new mansion, overlooking the manicured grounds. Thank you for the apology, Mom, I said, my voice calm and distant. But I didn't show off because I didn't need your approval. Your pride now is just as conditional as your pity was before. And no, Mom, we won't be hosting Thanksgiving here. Mark and I have decided to keep our new life private for a while. Emma's attempts were even more manipulative. She called crying about how she and David were struggling to keep up the payments on their Mac mansion and how much she needed my advice on investing, claiming she was so happy for me, but that she'd always felt so much pressure to be the perfect one. It's true, Emma, I said, cutting her off firmly. You did put a lot of pressure on yourself, and that's not my problem to fix. The only advice I have for you is this. Stop defining your worth by your husband's income or the size of your house. I worked for my success in private. You flaunted a success that was largely performative. You need to focus on what's real. I am happy to close that chapter and move on. Stephen, the one who called me homeless, sent a rambling, desperate email 2 weeks later, proposing a business partnership where he would handle the sales side of my next venture. I politely declined, citing a major conflict of interest and wishing him well. The boundaries were set, firmly, clearly, and without cruelty. My life now is truly peaceful, a stark contrast to the performative, judgmental existence I had navigated for years. I have a stable, loving partner, Mark, the Mark I referred to in my boundary setting, who was a professor of mathematics and fell in love with the quiet, determined woman, not the tech mogul. We are expecting our first child, a fact I've kept completely private from the family. The Atherton mansion is my base, but I still travel when necessary. But now it's on my terms and with the knowledge that a beautiful, stable home awaits my return. I've used my wealth to start a foundation dedicated to providing secure housing and digital literacy training for women escaping poverty, channeling my resources into lifting others up rather than using it for personal validation. I learned the most profound lesson from those years of being underestimated. Their judgment was never a reflection of my actual worth. It was a mirror reflecting their own insecurities and narrow views of success. My ultimate revenge wasn't the size of the house or the dollar amount, though $40 million is undeniably comforting. It was the quiet, confident knowledge that I no longer needed their recognition. I established my self-worth independently, and that kind of peace is more valuable than any dollar amount. I traded the need for family validation for the tranquility of authentic success. And what happened next, the beautiful life I built, was truly the final, sweet chapter.